Welcome back to part two of my conversation with Dr. Rain Masa. Today, we get into the nitty gritty of grant writing and productivity. If you are trying to find your rhythm as a scholar, this one is for you. Welcome to Grant Writing Made Clear. The truth is, the grant writing process isn't always clear, but with the right guidance, proven actionable strategies, and expert insights, the process becomes easier, simpler, and yes, clearer. I am Dr. Trinette, your host of Grant Writing Made Clear, and a former nonprofit president turned distinguished professor and behavioral scientist with 2 decades of grant writing experience. I remember what it was like to be a busy nonprofit leader with little time but big financial sustainability concerns. Over the years, I have transformed my skills from securing $1,000 foundation grants to winning multi-million-dollar federal grants. I created this podcast in response to the grant writing coaching requests I've received from nonprofit leaders, entrepreneurs, and professors over the years. Join me each week as I reveal insider strategies and share key lessons that turn wishful thinking into winning applications. Pull up a seat and get ready to be inspired, empowered, and transformed. Whether you're a beginner or a pro looking to sharpen your skills and create a life you love, you're in the right place, my friend. Let's get started. I'm thinking about just as you are writing a grant application, and I know you're super busy, you have grants that you're already managing, you are teaching in our DOT program, I believe, and doing lots of service. How do you maintain momentum in your grant writing?
Uh, Penguin clock is one.
Yeah, that helps.
I think how do we maintain? That's really a good question because I I think because we like what we do,
Mhm.
but sometimes even when we're not writing, we're thinking of a project related
Yeah,
to a proposal or an idea.
okay.
And so that helps with some of the momentum, right? But I think for me, having a team, right? Like
Mhm.
if I am writing, if I have co-eyes who are waiting for me and I know they're waiting and I promise them something, that's one type of accountability,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, because, especially if we say, okay, the AIDS deadline is coming up in January. And
Mhm.
so we plan ahead of time to make sure that we have deliverables for each
Mhm.
month or, each milestone in the proposal writing. But there are times when it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna write again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write again. But it helps again, I think going back to mentors who are successful. You know, you read how they've written their materials, you get ideas from them. And then if you've had successful proposals yourselves and you're building on previous work that you're doing, getting those ideas as well and making it easier to write, right? Like
Mhm.
I know some people might not be favorable with this method, but I know that some researchers would focus on, say, for example, HIV stigma in one grant with adolescent girls, and then they're going to move to HIV and cancer stigma among adolescent girls in this particular setting. So,
Mhm.
some might say that's not really very, the difference is not
Mhm.
very or minimal. The difference is minimal, but sometimes I realize because it's easier to write that follow-up proposal that's building on a successful grant that that person has written, right? Because
Yeah.
people would look at your record. People
Yeah.
would look at your what have you done? What have you successfully implemented?
Yeah.
What have you published? And
Yeah.
so, I know that not everybody is fond of that kind of method or strategy, but I've seen more more people do it, and
I have
it
to.
seems they're very successful,
Yeah, yeah.
you
I
know?
think that too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Rainy. I think that's helpful. I think that's the first time anyone has mentioned that on the podcast, and so I think that's gonna be a nice nugget for people. And so I wanna think you're right. We are constantly thinking about our research because we love our research, we love what we do. And so when you get a funding announcement and you're thinking about starting to write a grant application, would you tell us your process from the time you find a funding announcement that you think you might wanna consider? What is your
Mm.
writing process?
Yeah, so I think so the first thing I do, right? So you've heard of spin, right?
Yes.
I set up something with spin, and so I don't have to go through every single one. So everything with HIV, stigma, all the keywords that I think applies to my research, that's the one that I get, right?
Mhm.
But the first thing that I look at is, am I eligible, right?
Mm,
Especially if I'm doing global or international work,
mm, mm,
because right, some of the funding opportunity announcement may only be applicable to US based projects,
mhm,
right? And that
mhm,
if you're doing work overseas, it might not be applicable,
mhm,
right? So that's the first thing. I think the second one, especially the ones that are like the parent announcement, because sometimes it can be very, like everything. You can submit investigator initiated, right?
mhm,
So with that, I probably won't look at closely because it's investigator initiated, but the special FOAs, right? Like if the title for me is very descriptive. Like the one that I recently, where I submitted my R01 was stigma reduction interventions in low and middle income countries.
wow.
And I was
Okay.
like, yes.
Yes, right.
I want that
Yeah,
that one.
yeah,
So looking at the title, and then
yeah,
they, as you know, they will put R34,
yeah,
R01,
yeah,
R21, clinical trial optional, clinical trial required.
yeah,
And so in addition to the title, so I start with the title, HIV, if it's stigma, because particularly for HIV, there are some that are very biomedical. And
mm,
so some of the FOAs don't apply because they require different
mm,
sample, different modeling. But if it's something that's I know is social and behavioral science, like for example, the institute or center who's issuing it, if it's NIMH or Fogarty or NICHD, right? They're
mhm,
mostly social and behavioral. If
mhm.
it's from, what do they call it, NIAID, the allergy and infectious
Oh,
disease,
yes. Uh-huh,
right? Like
uh-huh.
they're
Yeah,
heavy on the more biomedical
yeah,
aspect. So looking also at who are the participating institutes and centers,
uh-huh.
right, in the FOA, and then going through what are the funders' priorities, right? Especially if it's an FOA with multiple centers or institutes participating,
Mhm.
they all have their priorities. And so I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, what's the priority of NIMH or
yeah,
NIMHD,
yeah,
right? Or
yeah.
even sometimes I would be hopeful that, say, the NHLBI would have a
Um,
funding priority that would
mhm,
align with
mhm,
what I'm doing. And
mhm.
so looking at what is the priority
Yeah,
of the funders.
yeah,
And also for me, even before I look at the funding opportunity announcement, I was told to always look at what's the priorities of the Division for AIDS Research,
mhm,
because that will be reflected
mhm,
across institutes,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
also look at special notice of special interests
Yeah,
and what could be
yeah,
participating, right? Like which mechanisms, which FOAs are these particular NOCs applicable to, right?
yeah,
And then I think for any researcher, always make sure that we know the date, the key date, because
yeah.
it's different for HIV. We have a separate deadline. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a separate deadline. It's not the regular NIH
Okay.
deadline.
Is it earlier
Yeah,
or later?
I don't know. It have
Okay.
a May 7th, September 7th, and January 7th.
Sounds like it might
So
be a bit earlier. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's
Mhm.
earlier.
Yeah.
So it's always, we have to plan ahead of time, which
Yeah.
I think for our school works because there aren't many people doing HIV research.
Mhm.
So Steve won't be as busy
Mhm.
versus when it's the
That
rest
is
of
helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
due dates,
Yeah.
and then really the key dates, the limit, the funding limit, right? Which I think we kind of know depending on what type of R
Yeah.
project it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, so those are, I think, the quick
That's
ones,
how you start the process.
eligibility. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Very helpful. Very helpful. And then see, and I guess as you are thinking about all of that, it helps you determine if you want to pursue it. If you have
Yes.
enough time to get this out in time, if your project idea aligns with their priority. So that's what helps you
Absolutely.
decide. Okay. Yes.
Right. And do I have the team that I can assemble? Right.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be the PI or if I'm going to be an MPI, right? Especially if, say, for example, when I was assembling the team for my R21, it's going to be focusing on Latino. And so I need someone who can speak fluent
Mhm.
Spanish, who's also an HIV researcher.
Mhm.
So I was introduced to a colleague from the School of Nursing. And so, now that we've worked together, if there is an announcement that is focusing on, Latino, Latina, or Latinx communities, and it aligns with what I'm thinking, I will reach out to her,
Okay.
right? To
Yeah.
increase the credibility
Yeah.
of the team
Yeah.
because I still recently I sat on a study committee or study review
Mhm.
and they were proposing this study, and I was looking at the personnel, and I'm like, "You're going to recruit Spanish-speaking individuals, yet none in your team, or you didn't specify that there's a member in your team
Yeah.
who is bilingual,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. As a grant reviewer, I use the same lens. Who is at the table? Who's at the table? Who's missing? Yeah, very good.
definitely.
And so that is a great segue, Rain, into my next
Mhm.
question, which is, what do you see as some of the common mistakes people make when writing grant proposals?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier the overly slash
Yeah,
vague
yeah,
goals.
yeah,
I think the second one, which is related to what we're talking about earlier, is poor alignment with the funder's
right,
priority,
yeah.
right? If the funders say intervention, then you better propose an intervention.
Yes, yes, yes,
If the funder says the sample must be people with diagnosed HIV and diagnosed another condition, then your sample should be cleared and should include those samples,
right,
right? Yeah, I mean, those are, I think, to me sounds like very clear misalignment.
yeah,
But sometimes, there are when we're writing and reviewing proposals, we get into the details that sometimes we forget that, okay, we might have started with a good alignment with the funder's priorities,
yeah.
but as we write more and more, it becomes, uh-oh, this is not, it's a whole different project. We're writing a whole different project already.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think another one is significance, right? If we are not able, and we got dinged for this one time, and I agree with the reviewers. It was for a separate R21 that we submitted with older people living with HIV.
Okay.
And I was working with a colleague from Northern Virginia.
Mhm.
And what we missed in the proposal was why Northern Virginia and North Carolina. I'm like,
Mm.
yes, of course. Why didn't we think of that?
Yeah,
Right. So thinking about what is the significance of doing this work in the setting where
yeah,
you're proposing the work,
yeah.
right? Which
Good.
gets into
That's good.
is it possible or is it feasible to recruit the number of people you want to recruit for your
Mhm,
study,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
So I think that's, sometimes we think of significance as maybe the least paid attention
Yeah,
part, but It's not because after the specific aims, that's the next page.
No, I agree. For me, Rain, I believe the significance and the approach are, for me, the 2 most important
Mhm.
areas. Because if it's not significant, why do it, right?
Right.
And the methods have to be solid. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has to be clear that it is a problem that affects a substantial, I mean, not saying a lot of people, but it is significant, right? Like, if it's only affecting 200 people,
Yeah.
right? And you
Yeah.
specify that in your significance, maybe try doing something
Yeah.
else,
Yeah.
expanding the generalizability
Yeah.
of what we're studying, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so significance, and then I mean the methods, right? The approach, because this is
Mm.
that's where your proposal makes it or breaks it,
Yeah.
right? To make or break. And so making sure that we spend enough time writing the approach
Yeah.
and being able to tell a story. Like one thing that I've learned from my mentor is if I'm reading this, don't make me think. Like I read it and I get what you
Mm.
want to do.
Yeah.
Because once you start making me think of what you're going to
Yeah.
do, I
Yeah.
will get irritated
Yeah.
because that lacks the clarity and the
Yeah.
consistency of what we're writing.
I
Yeah.
love that. That is so good. So we
Mhm.
want to be so clear in our writing that the reviewer does not have to think and wonder what's going on or where you're headed. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. And there are times when sometimes it becomes too, you know, clunky or what we're trying to propose, even though it's valid, can be difficult to read and can be frustrating to read for reviewers. So the other thing that I've learned is diagrams,
Mm,
images, include them in your proposal.
mm,
Like when you're doing a multi-component intervention,
mhm.
draw a diagram that would walk the reviewer what the
Yes.
treatment and what the control groups will receive and
Yeah.
what outcomes they're going to get.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think that's one thing I've learned through my mentor is using tables, using diagrams, because the pages 12 for an R01,
Yeah.
R34, 6 for R21,
Yeah.
and we like writing, but we have to abide by the
Yeah.
page limit.
Yeah.
And so these little nifty tables that you can put in there
Yeah.
works
Yeah.
to clarify your point and also include the content that reviewers may be looking at.
Yes. No, I really appreciate that because you're right. Sometimes it helps to have a visual. It just helps to connect the dots, especially if it's a complicated study, like you were saying,
Yes.
multi-component. It
Yes.
helps to connect the dots. So
Yes, yes.
I completely encourage anyone who's listening to use figures and tables to help tell your story.
Exactly, especially if we're using, an existing framework, like in HIV, research, we have the adapted framework, which people use all the time to, outline how they're going to adapt an intervention done, say, in North Carolina, but you're piloting it or you wanna test it in another setting, right?
Mhm.
And the table that I've seen and I've used to kinda succinctly describe how my steps align with the framework, and
Mhm.
then what are the activities, what are the actual research activities that I will do to achieve those steps or to
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
very helpful.
Very good, very good, and that leads nicely into if you were to provide 3 tips to people who are beginning to write grant applications, what would be your 3 tips?
Wow. First, don't be afraid to seek feedback, right?
Yeah.
Second, plan ahead. I know that especially for those on tenure track or tenure line,
Mm,
we have a clock, and the clock
mm,
is ticking.
yes.
But one thing that I've learned is it's better to wait 6 months than submit a proposal 2 months later, and you've used up all your time and energy and your capital to write an okay proposal versus something that you can submit later, but it's much more
Yep.
refined,
Yes.
you've gotten the feedback that you need,
Yes.
you've assembled the team.
Yes.
So
Yes.
feedback, time, and I think part of the feedback is getting somebody more senior to read them, particularly if you have a mentor. And then the other thing too, part of the time, planning ahead of time is have meetings, can be weekly meetings just to check in with the team that you're assembling. So you can start thinking about ideas. You can refine ideas even before you start writing the grant.
Yes.
And yeah, so I think those are three.
Yes. I
My
love
top.
all of those. I love all of them. I do. Um, and so I think as we wrap up, because I really appreciate your
This
time.
is fun, Jeanette. By the way, this is really fun.
And I'm enjoying this, Ray. I'm learning so much too. This is great. But I don't want to hold you here all day. I know you're super busy. So as we wrap up, I want to ask you about how you take care of yourself.
Yeah,
I know you're super busy. You're very productive. You do amazing work. You mentor people so well. How do you take care of yourself?
a good question. I think I need to better take care of myself.
Then,
I mean, this is not so much taking care of myself, but I think one thing that I've told and I've learned from my mentor is the generosity, right? Like,
mm,
this is how I was mentored.
mm,
Uh, my mentors were generous.
yeah,
So I pay it forward,
yes,
right? And I think when you know that you're doing the I will say the right thing or the good thing,
yeah,
then it makes you less stressed.
mm,
It makes you less like, "Oh, what is that person doing? What is that
yeah,
person doing?" Right?
yeah,
Like, you just remove the additional stressors
yeah,
that can make our work so toxic and
mm,
so
mm,
tiring,
mm,
right? I just so happen to be working with really, amazing people at GSDI. But I think it's surrounding yourself with people who you can trust and you can work with. And I know it's hard in academia to find people you can trust.
mm,
But I've been fortunate to have people that because loyalty will be tested,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But if you really believe and you truly value your work relationship, your friendship, I think it makes work
mm,
easier and less stressful. That even if you are not taking care of yourself, it feels like you're already taking care of yourself
yeah,
because you're removing people who
yeah,
are the ones that are,
yeah,
making work life balance difficult.
yeah,
But in terms of like just outside, like things that, when I go home, I watch this Filipino variety show.
mhm,
It's a comedy show,
okay,
uh, slapstick comedy. It's old, you know, that's what I do
yeah,
because it makes me laugh.
yeah,
It makes me really laugh, like hysterically sometimes.
okay, okay, yes,
Even our cats will be like, like when I'm traveling and I'm not there, my partner would say, the cats were looking for you because they're missing your laughter. And
yes,
so that's what I do. I just watch and I watch television, and I think it helps too to have a partner who's not in academia, so we don't
yeah,
have to go back and talk about the same thing.
yeah,
And like I've had this exchange with Gina multiple times. Our families don't even know what we do. They just
yes,
know that we are at some
yeah,
university, and so
yes,
when you meet with them, they're the nicest people, very
yeah,
supportive, but they don't think of you as a professor at this university.
yeah.
You're that kid that grew up, come get some, it to me that's
Yeah,
it keeps us grounded, it keeps me
yeah,
grounded. Yeah.
yeah, yes. I love it. I love all of that, Rain. And I love that you also just talked about preventing stress, ways
Yes.
of preventing stress. And I agree, building your team, building a good team is one of the ways that I do it as well. Mhm.
Exactly. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Life is short. I mean, I know we have to be, not only strategic, we have to also think about the human aspect of the people that we work with, but sometimes there are some people that we it will come to our realization that they're dragging us down.
Yes.
And so if we don't do it now, we're gonna be stressed, we're gonna be miserable,
Yes.
and we're gonna be not productive. And so also learning how to deal with that. Like that it's okay to stop working with someone, and there's a difference between a professional relationship with certain people and then personal relationship
Yes.
with some people. And
Yes.
hopefully, we all understand that. And if not, we can always have a conversation,
Yes.
right? Like explain, have a conversation, because things will be misinterpreted, will be misheard. And I'd rather, we talk and see that, this is not. And I've learned that from my mentors too. They
Mm, mm,
have to deal with colleagues that they have to let go. And it's very tough,
yeah.
because my investment, my attachment to certain people is not the same as my mentor. So
Mm,
watching them navigate that space with
mm,
enormous grace,
yes.
right? Is
Yeah.
is one thing to really watch and learn from them.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I do think it is better because it is hard to let people go.
It's
It's
hard.
not easy. Yeah. And so I do think as people are building their teams that I guess one tip is to choose carefully and slowly, right? Don't be in a rush to choose. Would you say the same? Like take your time and try to choose,
Take your time.
yeah,
Take
choose
your time.
carefully.
Take
Yeah.
your time.
Yeah.
And absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes the work that we do, like for example, the one in Zambia, where I have an MPI from the University of Zambia, it's okay to let them take the initiative as well,
Mhm.
in terms of like
Mhm.
selecting people
Mhm.
who they want to be on the team,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because uh, that's another level of, they are great researchers too, they know their stuff. So
Mhm.
let them do it. Give
Mhm.
them, freedom and agency, and without compromising the science and compromising the study. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Mm.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. This has been so insightful, and I agree, so much fun. You
This
have
is very
shared
fun.
that.
I love it. It's really fun. We should do more of this. We should
Yes.
do more of this.
Yes, we can invite others and have a whole conversation,
It
yes.
is fun. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you for being here, and thank
Anytime,
you.
of course, anytime.
Yes, and thank you to those of you who are tuning in. We appreciate your time. We hope that this has been helpful, and we will see you next week. Take good care. That concludes my conversation with Dr. Rain Masa. I hope you're walking away with insight, motivation, and maybe even a new sense of what is possible for your own career. If this episode encouraged you, please share it, leave a review, and stay connected. Until next time. Thank you for listening to Grant Writing Made Clear. I hope today's episode gave you inspiration, confidence, and clear information that you can turn into action. Remember, you are not alone. There's a whole community here striving for the same impact. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a quick review to help more people find the show, and share this episode with others in your network. It really does make a difference. For more grant writing tips and resources, follow me on social media. Until next time, keep showing up, keep learning, and remain determined. I'll talk to you next time. Goodbye for now.